Disney built the most expensive, most ambitious hotel experience in the history of theme parks. It lasted 18 months. This is inside the downfall of Galactic Starcruiser, Disney's $1 billion failure, the dream. The whole idea started not with a hotel, but with a question. In April 2017, Disney hired the survey platform Swagbucks to poll its visitors on a hypothetical. Would you be interested in a fully immersive Star Wars-themed hotel experience? One where you stayed inside the story, where the walls were the spaceship, where the cast members were the characters, and where everything that happened during your stay was part of a continuous narrative? The answer was apparently encouraging enough to move forward. At D23 Expo 2017 in Anaheim, Disney made it official. Alongside announcements of Tron, Guardians of the Galaxy, and 22 other planned projects across its parks, the company revealed plans for a Star Wars-themed hotel at Walt Disney World. Described by The Verge at the time as, "Disney wants to build a Westworld for Star Wars fans." The HBO series Westworld had premiered the year before, and was, at that moment, the cultural touchstone for an immersive narrative environment where participants were not observers of a story, but active agents within it. The framing was apt and deliberately provocative. This was not a Star Wars-themed hotel with some character meet and greets in the lobby. This was a proposal for an entirely self-contained narrative universe where the walls were the story, the staff were the characters, and guests lived inside the fiction from the moment they arrived until the moment they left. The audience response at D23 was significant. Star Wars fans, theme park enthusiasts, and the intersection of those two communities, which is a Venn diagram with very considerable overlap, received the announcement as the kind of thing Disney occasionally promised and rarely delivered at quite the scale suggested. This time, it appeared, the scale was exactly what was being suggested. 2 years later, at D23 Expo 2019, the details came into sharper focus. The hotel would be called the Halcyon, a luxury star cruiser in the Star Wars galaxy, operated by the fictional Chandrila Starline. It had its own in-universe lore. The Halcyon was a legendary vessel with a storied history dating back centuries in the Star Wars timeline, renowned throughout the galaxy for its elegance and service. It was so distinguished, Disney's story team decided, that Han Solo and Leia Organa had spent their honeymoon on board after the events of Return of the Jedi. This was a real piece of Star Wars canon that Disney created specifically to give the hotel narrative credibility within the universe it was inhabiting. Guests would not be checking into a hotel, they would be boarding a ship. Every element of the experience, the check-in procedure, the meals, the structured activities, the roaming cast members, the entertainment, would be framed entirely as events occurring aboard the Halcyon during an active voyage through the Star Wars universe. The events would connect directly to Galaxy's Edge, the 14-acre Star Wars-themed land that had opened at Disney's Hollywood Studios in 2019, so that a visit to the theme park land during the voyage would be, in narrative terms, a shore excursion on a planet called Batuu. The Star Cruiser and Galaxy's Edge would share a continuous story, running in parallel in a way that no Disney attraction and hotel had ever done before. The concept was genuinely original at the scale Disney was proposing. Immersive live-action role-playing experiences existed: escape rooms, theatrical dining, immersive theater productions, but none had been attempted by a company with Disney's resources, on Disney's timeline, at this level of physical and narrative ambition. If it worked, it would be the most immersive guest experience in the history of American theme parks by a significant margin. That was the dream. The execution was going to be the problem, but nobody in 2019 was talking about that part, what you were actually paying for. The Galactic Starcruiser opened on March 1st, 2022, delayed from its original 2021 target date by the COVID-19 pandemic that had closed Disney World's parks in 2020 and reshaped the company's construction and opening schedules across multiple projects. The delay meant the Starcruiser opened during Walt Disney World's 50th anniversary celebration, a moment of intense focus on the resort that generated significant press attention for everything happening there, including this new and unprecedented hotel experience. The experience worked like this. Guests did not arrive at a normal hotel entrance. They drove or were transported to what Disney styled as a space cruise terminal, a discreet departure facility separate from the rest of the resort. They checked in and were then ushered into the launch pod, a small capsule with overhead windows displaying a simulated blast-off sequence. The view of a Florida parking lot replaced by the view of Earth from orbit, stars appearing, the planet shrinking below. The capsule then docked with the Halcyon, the pod doors opened, and guests stepped directly into the atrium of the Starcruiser, surrounded by the full-themed environment, with character actors moving through the space as fellow passengers and crew. The ship environment included standard cabins and suites, a main atrium that served as a social gathering space, the Crown of Corellia dining room where all meals were served, the sublight lounge for between-activity drinks, a bridge where guests could operate navigation and defense systems under crew guidance, an engineering room accessible as part of story missions, and a lightsaber training bay where guests learned the fundamentals of the weapon from a Jedi instructor. Characters roaming the ship included both established Star Wars figures and new characters created specifically for the Starcruiser's story. The central narrative running through every voyage involved a First Order officer boarding the Halcyon in search of resistance spies hidden among the passengers. Guests were participants in that conflict, not bystanders watching it happen. Whether they chose to help the resistance, cooperate with the First Order, or navigate somewhere in between was supposed to be a genuine choice that shaped their experience. The mechanism through which those choices were registered, communicated to the cast, and woven into the branching narrative was the app. The whole voyage lasted approximately 41 to 48 hours. 2 nights, no more, no less. All guests on a given voyage arrived and departed as a group. Meals and non-alcoholic entertainment were included. A structured excursion to Galaxy's Edge in Hollywood Studios was part of the itinerary. Alcoholic beverages and specialty items were priced separately. The price for all of this, for 2 guests in a standard cabin for those 2 nights, started at $4,809. For a family of 4 sharing a standard cabin, you were looking at roughly $6,000 for the full 2-night package, and that is the entry-level figure before any specialty beverages, any merchandise from the onboard shop, or any upgrades. For a suite, significantly more. Disney's most premium Grand Captain Suite packages were priced in the range of $20,000 to $30,000 for the 2-night stay. Rooms at the Halcyon numbered 100 in total. That is not a typo. The entire hotel, if you can call it that, had 100 guest cabins and suites. In a resort complex that accommodates tens of thousands of guests per night across its various hotels, the Galactic Starcruiser held 100 rooms and needed to fill them at luxury prices to make the economics work. For context, the Ritz-Carlton in New York charges roughly $700 to $1,000 per night for a standard room. The Four Seasons in Beverly Hills runs comparable numbers. The Halcyon's entry-level standard cabin started at more than double those rates, for a room that, as later documented by multiple guests, was notably smaller than a standard room at a luxury hotel, featuring a bunk bed configuration and approximately 170 square feet of sleeping space, with a window that looked out on a projected Star Wars landscape rather than anything real. The trade-off being offered was smaller and less comfortable space in exchange for full immersion in a continuous Star Wars narrative. Whether that was a trade worth making at these prices depended entirely on what the narrative actually delivered. By one calculation that went viral after the hotel's closure, the Galactic Starcruiser experience worked out to approximately $2 per person per minute when measured across the 41 to 48 hours of the full voyage. $2 per minute is a number that sits very differently depending on what is happening in those minutes. If every minute of an immersive Star Wars adventure is engaging, exciting, and responsive to your participation, it might feel justified. If the app through which most of the adventure was supposed to be experienced is malfunctioning, it is just $2 per minute of a very expensive hotel room. The app, or rather, the problem with the app. The central nervous system of the Galactic Starcruiser experience, the thing that was supposed to make the choose-your-own-adventure element actually work, was a smartphone app called Play Disney Parks, specifically a Starcruiser module within it. This app was how guests received messages from characters, how they accepted missions, how they made narrative choices that were supposed to affect the direction of their personal story, and how they interacted with elements of the ship and Galaxy's Edge during the land visit. The app was also, according to a substantial number of guests, a persistent source of frustration that undermined the experience in ways that were very difficult to work around when you were in the middle of a $6,000 vacation. The problems were varied. Some guests found that the app failed to register their choices, placing them on a random narrative path rather than the one they had constructed for themselves. Character chatbots in the app went silent for stretches of time, leaving guests waiting for missions that never arrived or guidance that never came. Technical glitches during the Galaxy's Edge land visit, scanning story elements in an outdoor environment subject to Florida weather, which is to say rain, caused story progress to break in ways that could not easily be repaired within the time frame of a 48-hour experience. The fundamental problem was that the app was not just a supplementary feature sitting alongside the main experience. It was the mechanism through which the interactive, personalized, choose-your-own-adventure element, the thing that justified calling it a live-action role-playing experience rather than a theatrical dinner show, was supposed to be delivered to every guest. The whole architecture of the Starcruiser's narrative promise depended on the app working because the app was how your choices got registered, how characters knew what you had done, how the story branched in response to your decisions, and how the Galaxy's Edge visit connected back to the onboard story. Without it working reliably, the experience that was being sold and the experience that was being delivered were different products. When the app worked well, guests described the Galactic Starcruiser as genuinely extraordinary. A layered, responsive narrative that rewarded engagement at every level and made participants feel like actual characters in a Star Wars story rather than tourists watching one from a distance. Reviews from guests who had that experience are enthusiastic in specific and convincing ways. These were real responses from real people, describing something that worked as designed. When it didn't work, and the accumulated evidence from multiple guest accounts suggests this was not a rare failure mode, the experience became something else entirely. A very expensive hotel with professional theatrical performances happening nearby, connected to a smartphone app that had stopped talking to you. You were left watching a story you couldn't participate in, at $2 per person per minute. Press reviews of the Galactic Starcruiser, which were broadly positive at launch and contributed to an opening period during which voyages sold out, were based on a press tour that lasted approximately 4 hours. Polygon reviewer Charlie Hall publicly confirmed, after YouTuber Jenny Nicholson raised the issue, that he and other journalists attending the press tour were told about the app by cast members who described it to them rather than being given the chance to use it themselves. The experience that was reviewed in those early press accounts was a curated, guided, 4-hour version of something that guests were going to navigate themselves, alone, with their phones, for 48 hours. The gap between those two things is relevant to how the opening coverage was generated and what expectations it built. The price and the crowd it could reach. Even setting aside the app issues, the Galactic Starcruiser had a math problem that no amount of positive word of mouth was going to fully solve. Disney World's entire economic model is built on volume. The parks draw tens of millions of visitors annually. The hotels serve hundreds of thousands of guests per year. The merchandise, the food, the ticket sales, all of it works at the scale of a mass entertainment enterprise. The Galactic Starcruiser was the opposite of that. It had 100 rooms, 2-night mandatory stays, prices starting at $4,809 per cabin. At 100% occupancy running multiple voyages per week, the hotel could accommodate a limited number of guests per year, a fraction of Disney World's total visitor base. The market of people willing and able to spend $6,000 on a 48-hour Star Wars experience is real, but it is not large. It is not a mass market proposition. It is a luxury niche, and luxury niches require either exceptional margins or exceptional volume, and the Galactic Starcruiser's structural design prevented it from achieving either in sufficient quantity. By November 2022, 8 months after opening, Disney was already offering 30% discounts on select voyages to Disney Vacation Club members, the company's timeshare program, populated by Disney's most loyal and financially invested guests. Offering discounts to DVC members is one of the first signals that an experience is not filling at its listed price. In January 2023, Disney moved further, offering public discounts on pre- or post-Starcruiser Disney hotel stays to sweeten the overall package cost. These are not the actions of an attraction running comfortably above its occupancy targets. These are the actions of an attraction running below where it needs to be, working to generate demand from a market that either cannot afford the price, has already heard enough to hesitate, or both. The structural irony is that the 100-room ceiling meant Disney had very little room to maneuver. A larger hotel could have reduced its per-room price and achieved acceptable revenue through volume. The Galactic Starcruiser couldn't do that. It needed to fill 100 rooms at luxury prices to work financially. And the audience for luxury Star Wars immersive experiences willing to spend $6,000 for 48 hours, it turned out, was not as reliably deep as the initial sellout months suggested. The first few months had captured the core fan base willing to pay anything. What came after was the rest of the market, which had different math. Disney Parks chairman Josh D'Amaro was asked about the closure publicly after it was announced in May 2023. He said that the Starcruiser didn't perform how we wanted it to. That is a carefully contained description of a financial outcome that, by some estimates, cost the company somewhere between $250 million and $1 billion. It is the kind of sentence you construct when you want to acknowledge the failure without fully inhabiting it. The Jenny Nicholson effect. By the time the Galactic Starcruiser closed on September 30th, 2023, most of the internet discourse had moved on. The closure was news for a news cycle, and then it was background knowledge, a Disney footnote about an expensive experiment that didn't work out. Then, in May 2024, 8 months after the last voyage, YouTuber Jenny Nicholson published a 4-hour and 20-minute video titled "The Spectacular Failure of the Star Wars Hotel." The video went viral immediately and comprehensively, generating millions of views and reigniting public conversation about the Starcruiser in ways that the original closure announcement had not. Nicholson had visited the Galactic Starcruiser and paid approximately $6,000 for the experience, approaching it as a genuine Star Wars fan with a deep investment in both the franchise and the theme park medium. She had created a character, Amethea Tope, a Coruscant socialite with first-order sympathies, and arrived with a specific narrative intention for how she wanted to engage with the story. She was not looking for reasons to criticize. She was trying to have the experience that had been sold to her. What she found was an experience that she documented over 4 hours as systematically failing to deliver what it had advertised. The app did not register her character's choices. Instead of following the narrative path she had constructed, it assigned her what appeared to be a random storyline. Character chatbots went quiet during sections of the voyage when she was supposed to be receiving missions. During the galaxy's Edge land visit, a critical story moment in the Starcruiser's narrative structure, heavy rainfall, and the app's outdoor functionality combined to break her story progress in ways that couldn't be repaired within the remaining hours of the experience. The cast members playing characters were talented and clearly committed, she acknowledged, but they sometimes didn't engage with the narrative identity she had built or the choices she had tried to make. The video's argument was not simply that the Galactic Starcruiser was expensive. Its argument was more precise and more damaging. The specific thing that justified the price, the genuine, responsive, choose-your-own-adventure narrative, was either not functional, not delivered, or not what a significant number of guests actually received. The interactive promise was the product. The interactive promise, for many people, didn't work. The video also fully documented the press tour structure, that the positive early reviews had been generated from a 4-hour curated experience that did not include the app. Polygon's Charlie Hall publicly confirmed this after Nicholson raised it in the video. noting on social media that he and the other press attendees had been told about the app by cast members but had not used it themselves. This is not a small detail. The reviews that created the opening months of sellout demand were reviews of a version of the experience that regular paying guests would never receive. Disney responded to the viral video by filing copyright claims against it over music playing in the background of marketing clips Nicholson had used. Nicholson disclosed this on social media. The claims were widely reported as an unsuccessful, counterproductive, and optics-damaging response to what was, whatever else it was, a documented account of a real guest experience. What it cost. When the Galactic Starcruiser closed, Disney's accounting made the financial damage explicit in unusually specific terms. At the J.P. Morgan Technology, Media and Communications Conference in May 2023, the same conference at which the closure was announced, Disney Parks chairman Josh D'Amaro disclosed that the company was expecting approximately $100 to $150 million in accelerated depreciation in each of the two following fiscal quarters, meaning $200 to $300 million in total from the closure alone. Interim CFO Kevin Lansbury subsequently confirmed and narrowed that estimate to $250 million in accelerated depreciation from the write-down of the building's value. That $250 million figure is the confirmed accounting consequence of the closure, the amount Disney wrote off when the asset stopped producing revenue. It is separate from, and in addition to, the construction cost of building the Galactic Starcruiser in the first place. Construction cost estimates for the project have ranged from several $100 million to $1 billion, depending on the source, the scope being measured, and what pre-opening development costs are included. The building was purpose-built from the ground up on a dedicated footprint near Hollywood studios. Its deliberately windowless exterior was a specific design choice. Maintaining the illusion of a spaceship requires not having windows that look out on a Florida parking lot. Its interior was engineered to support a live-action narrative experience unlike anything Disney had constructed before, with custom AV systems, character interaction zones, a themed dining facility, and the physical infrastructure of the story world built into every space. Whatever the precise original investment, the total amount of money that went into the Galactic Starcruiser across conception, construction, and operation before closure was by any measure substantial. Disney's official statement at the closure announcement was careful and well-constructed. The Starcruiser had earned some of the highest guest satisfaction ratings in the history of Walt Disney World. True, in the sense that guests who went and engaged with the experience at full investment tended to give it high marks. It had won a Thea Award for Outstanding Achievement in Themed Entertainment from the Themed Entertainment Association, also true, and a meaningful recognition from an industry body that evaluates exactly this kind of work. Star Wars. Galactic Starcruiser is one of our most creative projects ever, the statement said. All of this is factually accurate. The creative achievement was real. The Imagineers, cast members, designers, and story teams who built the Galactic Starcruiser produced something genuinely unprecedented in scope. The problem was not a lack of creativity. The problem was a combination of pricing that eliminated most of the audience, a technology layer that was unreliable in ways the experience could not survive, and a marketing approach that created expectations the execution did not consistently meet. A subset of guests loved the Galactic Starcruiser in specific, detailed, irreplaceable terms. The subset that loved it was not large enough, wealthy enough, or renewable enough to sustain 100 rooms at $6,000 a voyage on a permanent basis. Once the early adopters and the most devoted fans had gone, the demand curve flattened faster than Disney's model required. Disney's closing statement also promised to take what we've learned to create future experiences that can reach more of our guests and fans. The phrase, "reach more of our guests," is the carefully polished corporate way of acknowledging the thing that most observers identified as the foundational problem. That pricing a two-night experience at $6,000 for a family of 4, inside a building with 100 rooms, was never going to be a sustainable business at a company whose parks annually serve tens of millions of people. what the building became. In January 2025, the Wrap reported that the Galactic Starcruiser building was being converted into additional office space for Walt Disney Imagineering, specifically a second location to house the teams working on upcoming theme park projects, including the Disney Villains-themed land planned for Magic Kingdom, the Monsters, Inky-themed land in development for Disney's Hollywood Studios, and the Tropical Americas land being built for Disney's Animal Kingdom. The building that was supposed to house the future of immersive entertainment is now housing the people designing more conventional theme park experiences. The Halcyon is, as of early 2025, an elaborately themed office building in Bay Lake, Florida. The deliberately windowless exterior that Disney designed to maintain the illusion of a spaceship now encloses a workspace. The launch pod capsule that simulated blastoff into space presumably has a different function. The Crown of Corellia dining room, which served galactic cuisine during active voyages, may or may not have become a break room or conference space. The bridge where guests once sat at navigation consoles and operated the ship's defensive systems is, at this point, a room with a lot of Star Wars hardware that Imagineering employees walk past on their way to meetings. The specific irony of the building's current purpose is not lost on anyone paying attention. The creative teams responsible for learning from the Galactic Starcruiser's failure are now designing the projects that will replace it in the building where that failure occurred. Whether that proximity produces better decision-making is a question only time and eventual attendance numbers will answer. As for whether the Galactic Starcruiser concept itself will ever return, at a lower price point, different scale, or different location, Disney has offered no public commitment either way. The closing statement said they were proud of the cast members and Imagineers who built it, and that they looked forward to delivering excellent experiences during the remaining voyages. That is a graceful and practiced way to end something that cost a great deal of money and lasted exactly 18 months. The Galactic Starcruiser was not a stupid idea. The concept of a fully immersive Star Wars narrative experience, where guests live inside a continuous story for 2 days, making choices that affect what happens to them, interacting with characters as fellow participants rather than as spectators at a show, is genuinely compelling. For the guests whose app functioned, whose narrative choices registered, whose missions arrived on schedule, and whose cast members engaged with the identities they had built, the experience was described in specific, irreplaceable terms as one of the best things they had ever done at a Disney park. That version of the Galactic Starcruiser was something real. The problem was, that version of the experience was not consistently available to everyone who paid for it. The app was unreliable in ways that the 48-hour, no refunds, non-extendable format of the voyage could not accommodate. The price was high enough that it narrowed the audience to a segment that was never going to sustain a permanent business. The marketing described an experience in terms that the technology could not reliably deliver. And the scale, 100 rooms, left no room to recover from demand softening at the price point required. That is, in the end, a significant accumulation of things to get wrong simultaneously, around an idea that was genuinely worth attempting. The building is now an office. The launch pod doesn't launch anymore. The Halcyon's final voyage departed September 28, 2023. If this story was worth your time, hit like and subscribe. There's a lot more Disney history like this, and not all of it involves a simulated blastoff.